Continuing our reading in The World and Thorinn by Damon Knight. Today is Chapter 3, Section 1. How Thornton discovered that it is easier to fall into paradise than to get out again. In the spring, when the pleasure pods were ripe, everybody in Pink Circle went on a picnic into the wild green along the River Wend. Grasshopper men went, 2 by 2, arms linked as they soared through the air. Doe women with their fancy men went, panting and wallowing. The gray-bearded knowers went, hobbling, leaning together, and sat on the grass to watch the young people. First, the virgin little girls and boys would collect food from the food vines that grew in the wild green, spicy ore apples and sweet nannaberries, meatlets in clusters, ham sandwiches from the ham sandwich bushes. Meanwhile, the young men and women would be gathering cushions from the cushion leaf trees and arranging them in circles on the cool, sloping lawns, near enough to hear the pleasant gurgle of the wind. The song girls would tune up their vine-strung rebecks, and there would be singing. Then the food gathered by the virgin little boys and girls would be heaped up and eaten. Then there would be jumping and running contests, games for the children, jokes and arguments for the elders. And finally, one by one, the people would wander off into the wild green until each had found a ripe pleasure pod, gaping invitingly, with its soft watermelon pink lining like a doe girl's, Each one would search until he found a pleasure pod that just fitted. Long, thin ones for the grasshopper men, round, fat ones for the doe women, short, stunted ones for the children and fancy men. The pleasure pods for the doe women had to be almost on the ground, for the doe women were clumsy and could not jump, but the fancy men could scramble up the tall, curled vines. For the grasshopper men could jump, twist as they jumped, and land gently on their backs inside the pleasure pods. The pods would dip a little lower with the weight of the people hanging down from their long, strong, flexible vines, and the lip of each pod would slowly close until the pod was shut tight, with the happy person inside like a worm in a floss weed. What dreams they had then, what pleasures, twitching and moaning with their pleasures so that the hanging pods trembled, first one, then another, then a whole row at once. When the skylight dwindled and the shadows turned greener in the wild green, the pods would open and the people would climb out, their limbs soft, their faces shining with remembered joy, eyes soft and far away, their movements slow. But some of the pods remained shut as the people wandered back toward Pink Circle. There were some who liked the pleasure pods so much that they would not come out for a day or 2 days or a week or week sometimes. And in fact, every spring when the pleasure pods ripened, there were always some dark old pods from the year before that hung heavy and shriveled on the dead vines until the wind or a boy climbing or a bird alighting knocked them down and they rolled into the carpet vines. These were old people mostly, who had nothing to gain by coming out of the pleasure pods. But there were young ones too, some every year, and even a child occasionally who stayed in the pods and never came out. What more can be said of Pink Circle, that long-gone place, than that it was perfect, an Elysium, without discord or bad food? Thus it was, thus it had always been, until that black day, aforeknown by the knowers, when a non-person climbed down into the wild green. Yes, he came from the sky, for a doe girl saw him. He opened the door like a yawn in the sky and fell, and caught himself in the trees of the wild green. And thus he came into the world of men. That's the end of section 2.